Ukraine's Kursk Operation, a look at the latest.
Hey everyone, today we're going to break down what's happening on the Russia-Ukraine border in the Kursk region. The Ukrainian Armed Forces have pushed into Russian territory. We've got info from both sides of the conflict, and we'll try to present it straight up, without any hype. But it's important to remember, don't jump to conclusions. History shows that things are often way more complicated than they seem at first glance.
What's Ukraine's game plan in the Kursk Operation?
Every military op has two sides, the war side and the politics side. The war part is all about hitting specific targets on the battlefield. The politics part is about getting the upper hand in negotiations. In the case of Kursk, the Ukrainian forces' move was likely a way to show they're serious, a major flex to show they're not backing down. Break Russia's borders, a big middle finger to Russia's territorial integrity. Get all the attention, a way to shift the spotlight to Russian soil. On the battlefield, some folks think they're trying to open up a whole new front. They're probably hoping to make Russia move some of their troops away from the east. With things getting tough in Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, and Kharkiv, this attack could be seen as a tactical win because it forces Russia to shuffle their deck. On the target list, some folks think they were going after key infrastructure like the gas hub in Suja, hoping to shut off the gas to Europe. Maybe they were aiming for major towns on the border, or even trying to mess with the Kursk nuclear power plant. What's the big picture? It could be all about making Russia look weak and unable to defend their own borders. Maybe even making people think they can't keep their nuclear stuff safe.
Why did the Ukrainians break through Russia's border defenses?
There were a few reasons why the Ukrainians were able to break through the border defenses. First off, the Russians didn't have enough firepower or fortifications to hold them back. Their battle plan didn't account for how strong the Ukrainian push would be. Even though they got through, the Ukrainians didn't manage to take any major towns. So it was a partial win, but not a total success.
Ukraine's Kursk Operation, a look at resources and the fallout.
The Ukrainian Kursk operation was a big deal, resource-wise. They threw in the works, deploying 3 to 6 brigades, including some of their elite units. It's important to remember that wasn't their whole stash. They had other troops ready for this area too. Some of these units fought in the south last year, which makes some people question whether this was just a distraction or not. Other Ukrainian troops have also taken losses in the Sumy area and on the border. They didn't hold back on the fancy equipment, HIMARS, Strikers, the whole shebang. It's a sign that they weren't messing around. If you add up the equipment losses, both official reports and estimates, it's like those first days of fighting around Robotyno. They lost or damaged around 100 vehicles, including tanks and some rare armored carriers. As for the troops, they're losing about 200 guys a day. Over those 18 days, they could have lost 2,500 to 4,000 soldiers, including killed and severely wounded. It wasn't just the raw recruits from the Territorial Defense Force either. Regular, well-trained troops took losses too. There's a good chance the Ukrainians originally planned to go in with a massive force, 10 to 12 brigades. But after those initial victories, they made some tactical and operational mistakes. The Russians were able to take back control. By the time things got serious, the Ukrainians were out of resources and advantages. The Kursk operation was an offensive, but not exactly what you'd call a full-blown counteroffensive like the one last year. Overall, the Ukrainian Kursk operation involved serious losses and planning blunders. Their early gains were temporary, and they probably didn't hit their main goals.
What did Ukraine actually achieve?
The Ukrainians took a big hit during the Kursk fighting. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, they lost troops, over 5,800 soldiers, more than 2 full Ukrainian brigades. Gear, 72 tanks, 31 IFVs, 58 APCs, 383 armored vehicles, 177 cars, 37 artillery pieces, 5 SAM systems, 11 MLRS, including 3 HIMARS and 1 MLRS, 9 electronic warfare stations, counter-battery radars, air defense radars, 5 engineering vehicles, including 2 armored engineering vehicles and 1 UR-77. It's worth noting those HIMARS losses. Losing so many of those high-tech systems so quickly might mean the Kursk attack wasn't just a distraction. It could have been the main thrust. They've lost an estimated 66 to 76 HIMARS systems since the war started. They lost as many launchers in the last 20 days as they lost in the entire previous half year or year on other fronts. The commander of Ukraine's ground forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, admitted that their goal was to make Russia shuffle their troops around. They were trying to pull them off the Donetsk front to deal with the Ukrainian attack. That didn't happen. So, even though Russia lost some resources and people, the Ukrainians didn't achieve their military goals in Kursk. It could even be a disaster for them in Donetsk if they're not careful.
Russia. Kutuzov's theory in action. Ukraine's Kursk plan isn't working.
Back in 1812, Mikhail Kutuzov, facing Napoleon's army, pulled a clever move. He retreated and burned Moscow. The goal was to wear down the enemy and buy some time. Today, it seems like Russia's using the same tactic in response to Ukraine's attack in the Kursk region. The Ukrainian plan to attack Kursk, forcing Russia to pull troops from the Donbass, sounds logical at first, but it's not working out so well yet. The Russian army is still pushing in the Donbass, considering it the top priority. Right now, the Russians want to take Pokrovsk, a big logistics hub that supplies Ukrainian troops on the front lines. The Ukrainians crossed the border easy enough, but the Russian Ministry of Defense learned its lesson and turned the Kursk region into a trap for them. The deeper they push, the more opportunities the Russians have to hit them. Kiev is trying to spin this as a win, showing they're taking Russian territory. But they're struggling to make it happen with their military. They haven't achieved their goal of breaking through, and they're having to hold a bunch of territory, which they really need in the Donbass. Russia, like Kutuzov, sacrificed some land to buy time and focus on a bigger goal, taking Pokrovsk. Western experts are quick to call the delay in hitting back disorganization, but Russia is playing the long game, following a tried-and-true Kutuzov strategy.
Ukraine's Kursk operation, a price tag of losses and a failed strategy.
The Ukrainian offensive in Russia's Kursk region turned into a series of losses and a failed strategy. Basically, it threw their whole, purely defensive war narrative out the window. One, heavy losses. The Ukrainians are taking a serious beating, losing a ton of troops and equipment. The Kursk offensive is basically a bloodbath, with their forces facing massive Russian attacks. 2. No slowdown in Russia's eastern push. Despite the attack in Kursk, the Ukrainians can't hold their ground in eastern Ukraine. The Russian army is still making big gains there. 3. Losing territory in eastern Ukraine, things are getting worse in eastern Ukraine. Civilians are being evacuated from more areas, which means Ukrainian commanders don't think they can hold those positions. Busting the defensive myth, the Kursk attack blew up the idea of a purely defensive war. It shows Kiev wants to do more than just defend itself. They want to hit Russia hard. Going from self-defense to striking and occupying Russian territory contradicts their earlier goals. It probably won't go over well with some of their Western allies who were cool with supporting Ukraine on defense, but not on occupying the territory of a nuclear power. 5. A pointless attack. The land they took in Kursk isn't going to be part of Ukraine anyway. The Ukrainians risk losing it in a counteroffensive or even in peace talks. At the same time, this attack is pulling forces and resources away from more important fronts in eastern Ukraine, where the real fights are happening.
Bottom line.
The Kursk attack was a strategic blunder, resulting in major losses and no real upside. It seems like Ukraine's leadership, caught up in the media hype, is ignoring the human cost and common sense. This will likely drag out the conflict and delay any peace deal.